Then the third dimension is thinking versus feeling, and this is very straightforward. You know, the thinking person, they focus on objectivity, rationality, logic. They try to hide feelings. Efficiency is more important than social harmony and competition and cooperation. Reason can override your emotions. And of course, the feeling then is more sensitive and expressive, empathetic. So that's a lack here in the thinking dimension. And interested in social harmony rather than competition. So who scores here at I think it's a T? Thinking? T. Who is in the feeling category? Oh.
It's interesting to see a difference in gender.
Difference in, exactly. Yes, we're getting into closer, and we will also see how this might affect your political beliefs. There's a political dimension to this. So, judging versus prospecting is the fourth dimension. It's very easy explained. I always say judging can be explained by you are being very German. Okay, so judging means you are decisive, thorough, very organized. You do not like ambiguity. You like certainty. You have a strong sense of duty and responsibility. You know, if you make a commitment, you stick to this commitment. Okay, and you're strict about rules, and you have a strong work ethic. So this is about how you basically conduct your life. So the judging is as I said, very German. Prospecting is you're good at improvising. You know, if you committed to a plan, but a better plan goes along, you might just leave this aside. So in a nice way, this says prefers keeping options open. You know. Spots potential opportunities. This is the nice phrasing of, sometimes you can let people down or like something better. Commitment based on enjoyment. Okay, this is a prospecting. So this is how you conduct your life, you know. Somebody who's very duty bound, very strict, like I have a clear routine versus somebody, let's see this, no, this abandoning, go there. Improvising. Okay, who has, I think judging, prospecting is J versus P, or what is it?
J.
J? Okay, where's J? Okay, you can apply for the German citizenship afterwards. And prospecting, I think it's P. Okay. What?
I have to say something. It's funny because yesterday Oscar and I talked about rules, and I was the one who said rules is good, but people need to think out of the to open their mind, and Oscar was but rules is really important, and now I am the judging and Oscar.
You better go solve this now.
He would like to be, but maybe his personality type just doesn't fit.
Right.
The reason. Anyways, the last one is how you react to external feedback. It's turbulent versus assertive. So assertive are very self-assured individuals, somebody who doesn't care so much about external feedback. They are stress resistant, they basically evaluate their own performance by themselves. Like, I have done well, the rest, that doesn't matter so much. They are confident in their abilities and more relaxed about the outcomes. If I put everything in and the outcome wasn't great, it was not my fault. So this is the very assertive type. I'm also very assertive in my personality. Then turbulent, and this is I think also something that really my friends would say, this is totally true. Turbulent is you are very self-conscious, you are very sensitive to the external feedback, you want to be perfectionist because you don't want to disappoint somebody, and that of course has some downturns because, and that's why a lot of companies also check for this dimension, because they can push their environment. They always say, oh my god, we have to also satisfy this client and this. And if I have a co-facilitator who is very turbulent, they always say, but this participant didn't like this session, and then they are like super sad. And I say, oh well, you cannot make it like this. We did great. Whatever. And you see what I mean? And you will see that in your, hopefully in the way you conduct your work. Some people, they want to create a social harmony that everybody's always happy with their performance. And the assertive person just says, okay, we did great, and let's see, that's enough that we can do. So who gets an A as the last character? Okay. Oh. Who gets the T? Oh. Okay, do you think it's true for you? Who has the T? Yeah, okay, I see. Oh, that's in between. So yeah, I think it's very hard to exactly test this. I think these kind of online tests have of course one downturn because we fill it out the way we perceive it. And especially for turbulent versus assertive, there's also the outside typing mechanism. So a more experienced person will type you over time, and for example, your friends can tell you whether actually better in which category you would fall. Alex?
And it also depends on the enjoyment of the task that gets me either turbulent or assertive.
Yeah, I mean, could be context dependent, but most of the time you see that, I mean, there is a normal distribution, right? So there can be people really like in the really center where we cannot see what's going on.
The
But,
percentage is important, isn't it?
say it again? The percentage is
The
important.
percentage is very important.
In what way?
Well, I know I have 51 turbulent, and I'm discarded for all big companies. Right? So I may mention that.
Yes. Mikko. He basically just said that he has only 51% of turbulence, so he wanted to find an excuse for the big companies to still hire him.
You're right.
No, they look at the team mix. If one team is only turbulent, they don't get things done. That's apparently their
Alright.
experience. Anyways, without diving too much into this, this 16 personality test tracks something that we call in social psychology the big 5 personality traits. And the big 5 personality traits are the ones down here. Extroversion, agreeableness, and these are not the terms that you will find in psychology papers. Extroversion, I explained. Agreeableness is the social harmony. How much you like to have social harmony. If you're low on agreeableness, you're basically a contrarian. You enjoy when you disagree with somebody. Conscientiousness was the prospecting versus judging dimension. It's like how orderly are you in conducting your everyday life. Neuroticism is the social feedback. So if you're very neurotic, obviously you're very vulnerable to the social feedback. And openness and intellect openness is how open are you to new experiences. So this is a little bit of a different dimension that we didn't fully map yet. But there are political implications from these personality traits. We are not only different in our characters, and that makes our interaction sometimes a little bit rough, but there are political outcomes. One of them we can already map, for example, this is the City of London. This is a very recent paper, I think 2017 or 2018, because it's very new personality studies with urbanism coming together. It's very new. So what they did is they mapped the big 5 personality traits and mapped them over the City of London. Of course here, I mean, you see the Thames and you see that here's the real big center of London with what we really understand as the City of London. And if you look to openness to experience scores here very high. So if you score on openness to experience, you flourish in the City of London, or you move to the center. So that's also where I have my home. So you move to the center of London. Also interesting, if you tend to be very disagreeable, agreeable, very low scoring, so if you like to contradict others, which is, by the way, is like also correlated with a high IQ, you move to the center. So you see certain personality types cluster, and again, with the density that we have in London, we can infer statistically at least a trend. I'm not saying that this is a fundamental truth, there can be many different factors going on, but it's interesting that you have such a great density, for example, for this dimension. And this dimension has, I would say, later on very strong political implications. But to explain this, let's a quick interlude. This is, for example, agreeableness. It's another dimension. Agreeable, here this one. Agreeable is how you can distinguish very clearly between the genders. It's the only of the big 5 personality traits where it's so clear. There's neuroticism and conscientiousness where there are some differences. But here you see amongst cultures, clear gender differences. And they can be biological, but they can also be socially constructed. It doesn't matter where these differences come from. Statistically, you observe that there are the differences which are very strong. Especially at one subset of the data of agreeable, which is called compassion or empathy. In terms of empathy and compassion, males versus females diverge heavily. Females score much higher than compassion. It's robust amongst all cultures. Okay? And of course, there might be a biological explanation because they have to take care of the family. However, also there might be a social explanation because we have the stereotype of the empathetic woman and girls are pushed into a certain direction or whatever, you know. So there might be both going on. Doesn't matter where it comes from. What do you now expect, and this is the big learning point, what do you now expect happens in more gender equal societies? Does this get stronger or weaker? Gender differences in personalities. Does it get stronger or weaker?
Weaker.
Who says weaker?
Weaker.
Weaker. Okay. Who can explain why it might get weaker? Yeah, Hannah?
I feel like in gender equal societies, the normative definition of male and female roles are a bit relaxed, and therefore people can be themselves maybe more like in a more regulated way. So the stereotypical male, the very dominant figure, there's no pressure on that in that culture, and the same thing for the female.
Okay?
Just on the graphic,
Yeah.
females will pull the males up, and males will pull the females down. So in the middle, they have to meet somewhere in the middle.
Let's see. What happens when we talk about gender differences in richer societies? Suddenly, gender differences in, for example, whatever, let's take altruism, which is a part of compassion. Gender differences go up. So this is the gender difference. In poorer countries, there are less gender difference than in rich countries. And now you say, well, maybe it's about wealth, and like Saudi Arabia might be in the data set, so it might be flawed. What they now mapped is gender differences in more gender equal societies. Like Sweden is a very gender equal society, okay? And they mapped according to these criteria. And what you see is that gender differences amongst all the big criteria here go up. And that's weird. We have a more gender equal society and gender differences go up in terms of personality traits. Can somebody explain this?
Maybe.
Yeah?
Maybe because there is a competition between. Maybe because in this society there is a competition between the male and female, which make it each one of them wants to be more present, more powerful. That's why. In the other society, their role are separated, so they are not confronted a lot.
Okay, so that there's more competition and therefore they go more forward. Okay, let's see.
I think when the country or the area is more gender equal, it allows the natural tendency of the gender to grow. So a woman will have allowed to grow. Whereas when you are in a country where there's a lot of problems and so on, you can't really prosper in none of your tendency.
Yeah, I think that's already going at the really right direction. So remember what Kamran Cesar says about differentiation. The more open, rich, and more progress, we differentiate out, basically, as a society. And what happens in societies that are more gender equal, therefore more prosperous and whatever, you have more choices available to you, and your personality traits, your individuality matters more. And part of your individuality is, of course, your gender or whatever, your personality trait. So the differences in personality traits get bigger. That's the big finding. It's not that the genders get bigger, that's just a very important case study where we have a lot of data. What's important to notice is these differences in personality traits get amplified. Because in the past we all had kind of to do the very same thing and have very similar life choices. Now we open up so many different life choices. We have so much differentiation open to us, therefore we develop our individuality much, much more, and therefore the differences become bigger. Differences between people become bigger the more equal we get, and that's the paradox. Because we become richer, there are more choices available, there's now much more cornflakes available than in the past, you have different kind of choices available. And so differences between each of us get bigger, and this then has political repercussions as well as, if we look at the map of London, this might be a bigger trend even. if people with openness to experience like an environment that is a city, because there's so much buzz going on, there's always something new to learn, many different interactions, access to many different cultural settings within a basically fingertip, basically this gets stronger over time. Because now this will be an amplifying trend. Okay? So if my finding here is true from what we observed, where we have most data, which is the gender differences, is true, then features like openness to experience get more and more important. And now, with all this having in mind, I will tell you that this can tell you a lot about the politics. Okay, so
Where can we get that study? It's
I can
interesting.
provide all the data, yes. Yeah. So here's a little question by a student like mine, like Jack. Why should I care all about this? This is interesting, but why? How is it linked to politics? Okay, well, so here's a statue. And if you look at that statue, there are some people who feel more easy with the statue, and there are some people who feel less easy. Like for example, Adam, he admires this statue because it represents civilization, you know, Roman or Greek art, you know, the shape of the body adored. And Bill, however, find it a little bit odd because it shows some nudity, you know, like doesn't really want to see what's going on. And they did this test, and what they found is that how you react to this kind of art can tell you much about politics. Because Bill, in this experiment that they did, was more likely to vote for George W. Bush. So what they tracked here is openness to new experiences. The liberal voter in this case was more able to say, oh great, this is like, you know, great piece of art and I want to see more of this. He's like, this is not kind of my piece of tea, you know, like there is, please cover it. Okay. And this has been a really robust strand of social research now, which is called social psychology and the intersection of politics, basically political intuitions. And there are 5 things which they kind of test with people. And they are very much linked to the personality types of people. And what you can see is that in these intuitions, people differ based on their personalities, not on their reasons. Okay? They differ because they have different intuitions about something, and these intuitions obviously come a little bit from their personality traits. So here, the first one, harm, is important to everyone. So if you expose somebody to harm, both liberals, and by here liberals I mean social democrats, because it's an American study, social democrats, so left wing and right wing agree, harm is bad. Okay, so it's kind of uninteresting. But here you see already something interesting going on. Fairness, on the left leaning, this is their second most important political intuition. A lot of how they evaluate a political scenario is based on fairness. And look where it is for conservatives. It is their least ranked intuition. So based on the intuitions that they are having about a certain political scenario, fairness doesn't play a big role. However, the inversion is true for authority. Liberals, so left-wing, they don't care much about authority. Authority means, for example, the church, or like somebody of higher hierarchy says something to you, do you give that status? And of course, left-leaning as well as liberals, they don't care, you know, they don't have an intuition about authority, they question authority. And instead, for conservatives, they have a high value associated with authority. In-group, out-group, if somebody is from the same ethnic group, for example, for liberals, doesn't matter that much. Whether you're from the same baseball team, they fight, by the way, also with themselves. So that's, by the way, something you see also in the political movements. The left always fights with itself as well as liberals. They always fight with themselves. So they don't have in-group loyalty. And the last one is called purity. And this is very striking. Because for liberals, they don't understand when Americans are obsessed with somebody burning a flag. So if you burn a flag, a lot of left-wing people or liberals say, what's the problem? Burn a flag, you know? While conservatives take this as an insult. It insults something deeply about them, and it motivates them to go to the streets or riot. Okay, or think of the Prophet. If there are caricatures about Prophet Muhammad, people go on the streets and like riot, or think about Salman Rushdie, I mean, demanding physical violence and like whatever kind of punishment. This is where you see that conservatives are lined up because they put a high value on something that is called purity. So let me flesh that out. I just say quickly, these kind of political intuitions come from our personality traits, from our composition of our personality. Right, I get it up here. And our political decision making, even if we like it, is very much informed by the intuitions that we have. We have a lot of moral intuitions, we have a lot of political intuitions. So 99% is more impulsive in our decision making, one might say. That comes from David Hume. Like it's automatic, it's a mental activity, and only 1% is really the conscious reasoning, even if you're very analytical. Okay? So we are kind of the slaves of the passions, that's what Hume says. So I explained the 5 dimensions. Harm is like how, I mean, it's less interesting because everybody has very strong intuitions that harm is bad. The left has maybe a little bit more. They also include harm towards animals as something they have very strong intuitions about. Fairness and justice is a very big differentiator. In-group loyalty, I explained. Ethnic groups, other kind of foreign groups, authority and respect for tradition, hierarchy, authority. And the last one is purity and sanctity. I think the flag burning example and which else? The flag burning example and the prophet caricatures